70 years on the throne, 70 years of diplomatic intrigues and historic meetings with the world's most powerful figures. Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II became a living symbol of stability and wisdom in her relations with 12 American presidents, each of whom left their mark on history. These meetings and conversations behind closed doors reveal incredible stories filled with unexpected twists and personal nuances. What bonded the Queen and the presidents? How did her charm and insight affect international relations and decisions upon which the destinies of entire nations depended? Let's immerse ourselves in the mysterious atmosphere of royal receptions and uncover the secrets hidden behind official handshakes and political declarations. This video reveals intriguing details and little-known facts about how the British Queen and American presidents crafted history. Don't miss the chance to get closer to royal secrets. Queen Elizabeth II was the British monarch for 70 years. This means her reign encompassed a range of iconic historical events and meetings with many legendary figures of the past century. The monarch personally knew the last 12 U.S. presidents. Elizabeth first visited Washington in 1951. Before becoming queen, she flew to the United States to meet with Harry Truman. The princess and the president exchanged pleasantries, showering compliments on both Americans and Britons. Truman called her a fairy princess. Truman was nearing the end of his term as president when Elizabeth II ascended the throne in 1952 and began her reign with an extensive tour of the Commonwealth nations. This remains the longest tour for the current British monarch. It lasted a full 6 months, from November 1953 to May 1954. During this time, the Queen visited the West Indies, Australia, New Zealand, and countries in Asia and Africa. It was a significant moment for Elizabeth, as she fully realized her role and the duty bestowed upon her during the journey. In 1957, Elizabeth II visited the United States for the first time as a reigning monarch. During the 4-day trip, she visited New York, Washington, D.C., and Williamsburg in Virginia. The Queen also met with the 34th President of the U.S., Dwight Eisenhower. Although Elizabeth had been acquainted with the American leader before, this was their first meeting at an official level. When former President Dwight D. Eisenhower was the supreme commander of the Allied forces in Europe during World War II, he developed strong working relationships with the then Prime Minister of England, Winston Churchill, and King George VI. Eisenhower regularly visited the king and his family throughout the war, becoming acquainted with the royal family through diplomatic channels. With the new president, Queen Elizabeth formed a very warm friendship. This is confirmed by Jim Ginter, the archivist at the Dwight D. Eisenhower Presidential Library. According to him, the leaders had special working relations. They exchanged letters for years. The Queen once shared her signature pancake recipe with Eisenhower. This happened in 1959 after a stay at Balmoral Castle in Scotland. However, it was only in January 1960 that the Queen sent not only the recipe but also a letter of apology on official Buckingham Palace stationery. It's worth noting that the Queen, having promised to give the recipe, had forgotten her promise. As mentioned in the letter, she remembered only when she saw a photograph of Eisenhower standing in front of grilled quail. That reminded her of his request and her promise. One of the sweetest parts of the letter, which is accessible today to fans of the British royal family, is the Queen's note about the recipe. When fewer people are expected, she reduces the amount of milk and flour, but leaves the other ingredients unchanged. The original recipe used cups as a measurement and was intended for 16 people. Over time, according to Ginter, the working relationship between Eisenhower and Queen Elizabeth began to extend beyond their own countries. The opening of the St. Lawrence Seaway in 1959 became a hallmark of their joint work. It was not the only project they worked on together, but perhaps the one with the greatest international impact. The idea for the seaway dates back to the 1800s but was only made possible when Eisenhower signed the Wiley-Dander Seaway Act in 1954. Their correspondence shows the Queen's support for the act and what it would mean for international maritime trade. The project created a larger channel between Lake Ontario and the Atlantic Ocean to increase maritime traffic through Canadian and U.S. ports. The seaway allowed large ships to sail directly from the Atlantic Ocean to Duluth, Minnesota, on the Great Lakes. After the opening of the seaway, Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip visited the White House once more when Eisenhower was in power in 1957. Queen Elizabeth II's mother also visited Eisenhower and the White House in 1954 and again in the 1960s. Dwight and his wife were so fond of Queen Elizabeth and her family that they sent her a wedding gift even before she ascended the throne. There was a wonderful letter that Queen, at that time Princess Elizabeth II, sent to the Eisenhowers, thanking them for the wedding gift, said Ginter. It was a silver ashtray they gave to the Princess and Prince Philip when they got married. What interested me about this letter was how touched she was that they sent such a gift. It was a gift similar to those they sent to other friends, and it was given to them in the same spirit of friendship. I think it says something about the relationship and sense of connection between them. In 1961, John F. Kennedy and his wife made an official visit to London. This visit took place just a few months after Kennedy took office, and was even depicted in an episode of the second season of the Netflix series, The Crown. The meeting between the First Lady of the United States and the Queen of the United Kingdom at Buckingham Palace made history. The nature of the relationship between these two great women is still debated. Some claim that not everything was smooth between them, while others say they actually got along very well. Barely 4 months had passed since President Kennedy's inauguration. Mrs. Kennedy was still adjusting to her new role. On January 20, 1961, John Kennedy assumed the presidency of the United States. For months later, he and his wife, Jacqueline, met with Queen Elizabeth II for the first and only time. Their personal acquaintance left its mark on world history. The First Lady of the United States was incredibly nervous and unsure how to interact with the royal figure. John was calm because he had a special gift for Elizabeth. As a gift, Kennedy presented her with his photo portrait in a silver frame from Tiffany & Company, personally inscribed, "To Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, with appreciation and the highest esteem, John Kennedy." It said the gift surprised the Queen, as guests typically gave her entirely different presents, like jewelry or works of art. In honor of the American guests, Elizabeth II hosted a banquet that the British Prime Minister Harold Macmillan described in his diary as very pleasant. In a birthday card to the Queen, Kennedy himself fondly recalled the reception. "Let me say that my wife and I are grateful for the warm hospitality extended to us by Your Majesty and Prince Philip during our visit to London last Monday. We will always cherish the memory of that delightful evening." In The Crown, this meeting was covered in great detail. Jacqueline Kennedy, who was given a tour of the palace by Elizabeth II, charmed the Queen. They had a pleasant conversation, and it seemed their mutual admiration was genuine. However, rumors later reached the Queen that Kennedy had criticized her. She was not impressed with either the palace or its hostess. According to the Telegraph, royal photographer Cecil Beaton wrote in his diary that Jackie was unimpressed with the palace's setup, as well as the comparatively old-fashioned wardrobe and hairstyle of the Queen. On that day, the First Lady appeared at dinner in an elegant blue silk gown, while the Queen wore a more old-fashioned A-line tulle dress. Writer Gore Vidal also stated that Jackie found the Queen too severe. According to Reader's Digest, Kennedy told another aide, American writer Gore Vidal, "I think the Queen took offense at me. Philip was charming, but nervous. There seemed to be absolutely no connection between them." Vidal also claimed that after meeting Elizabeth II, Jacqueline described her as quite heavy. When years later Vidal mentioned this to Elizabeth's sister, Princess Margaret, she retorted, "But that's what she's here for." In The Crown, Jacqueline Kennedy personally apologized to the Queen for speaking unfavorably about her. Whether this conversation took place in real life and whether Elizabeth II was even aware of the First Lady's comments is unknown. When Jacqueline visited London the following year, the Queen invited her to dinner. Jackie later told the press that she was very grateful to the Queen for the invitation and called her charming. She did not reveal details of their conversation. In 1963, the Kennedys planned to host Elizabeth II and Prince Philip at the White House, but the Queen became pregnant, and the meeting was postponed. Sadly, they never met again in the same setting, as John Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas a few months later. Jackie captivated the world with her intelligence, grace, and deep sense of devotion to her family and country. 7 years later, in 1969, the first official meeting between Elizabeth II and the newly elected U.S. President, Richard Nixon, took place. The leaders were acquainted from before, having first met when Nixon was still the vice president, but that meeting was unofficial. Nixon harbored hopes that his daughter Tricia might one day become the wife of British Prince Charles. Those plans, however, were not to be realized. According to Nixon, Charles was a real gem of the royal family and made a significant impression wherever he went. The 21-year-old prince responded to the praise, saying, "The kindness shown to us at the White House was almost overwhelming, and for that, we are immensely grateful." According to newly surfaced letters and interviews with those involved in organizing Prince Charles and Princess Anne's visit, President Nixon had a hidden motive involving his daughter Tricia. The president showed particular interest in the personal life of the heir to the throne. Biographer Sally Bedell Smith wrote that Nixon tried to match the future king with his daughter. More than 30 years later, when Charles and his new wife Camilla visited George W. Bush and Laura Bush at the White House, he joked that the Bushes had better not try to marry off their twin daughters to his sons, William and Harry, as Nixon tried to match him with Tricia. She wrote. In a 2021 interview, Charles reflected again on this trip to Washington and the arranged social events. "I must say, it was quite amusing," he told CNN. "That was a time when there was an attempt to marry me to Tricia Nixon." First Lady Pat Nixon did not accompany her husband on that occasion because the trip was organized too quickly. However, Her Majesty would meet the First Lady in 1970, when she and President Nixon visited the United Kingdom in October 1970. 1976 was a special year for the United States as the country celebrated its 200th anniversary of independence. President Gerald Ford hosted a celebration in honor of Queen Elizabeth's visit, during which he assured everyone that he always sought to strengthen the ties between the two countries. He added that it was every American's duty to honor the memory of the British heritage. The monarch and the president even danced together to a song from the cartoon Lady and the Tramp, which many in the Western press found amusing at the time. Queen Elizabeth's attire drew much attention. She wore a bright yellow dress with intricate embroidery. The unusually shaped sleeves did not seem out of place, as Elizabeth complemented her hands with long white gloves. For jewelry, the Queen chose a beautiful tiara and a luxurious set of accessories. According to First Lady Betty Ford, a few hours before the state dinner, everyone in the White House was very nervous due to an unexpected thunderstorm with lightning and rain. Queen Elizabeth's most unpleasant impressions were from her meeting with Jimmy Carter. During Carter's visit to Buckingham Palace on May 1, 1977, he was greeted by Queen Elizabeth II, Prince Philip, and the Queen Mother. During his meeting with Queen Elizabeth II at Buckingham Palace, President Jimmy Carter decided not to bow and instead broke protocol by kissing the Queen Mother right on the lips. It's said that the Queen recalled this gesture with disapproval for many years. Carter's excessive friendliness did not sit well with the Queen Mother, who retorted, "No one has done that since my husband died." Her husband, King George VI, had passed away in 1952. The Queen Mother immediately took a dislike to the former peanut farmer from Georgia. She later wrote about the uncomfortable encounter. It appears she saw Carter leaning in for a kiss and tried to dodge his plump lips. "I took a sharp step back, not very far." Although the royal protocol does not mandate specific ways to greet the Queen and the royal family, often a man bows his head or simply shakes hands. An American is not required to bow or curtsy, but kissing royal lips is definitely beyond the pale. President Carter remarked on his conversation with the Queen during dinner. "One of the things I said to Queen Elizabeth was how much the American people appreciated her coming last year to celebrate our bicentennial, and she said it was one of the warmest receptions she had ever received. In the 70s, Elizabeth II began a series of regular visits to Australia. One of her visits, along with the Duke of Edinburgh, was marked by a walkabout. The monarchs walked beside a crowd of subjects and personally greeted them, instead of waving from a car, as British royals traditionally did. Gradually, this type of greeting became commonplace for members of the royal family, bridging the gap between them and their subjects. In the first 2 years of Ronald Reagan's presidency, he and his wife Nancy spent an unusually large amount of time with the British Queen and Prince Philip, which undoubtedly contributed to their closer relationship. The Times wrote about that period. At the banquet dinner at Windsor Castle in 1982, the Queen, after standing for God Save the Queen to toast the president, began by mentioning how much she enjoyed their horseback ride together. Queen Elizabeth visited President Reagan at his ranch in California in 1983. In his memoirs, Reagan wrote, "There were many, many small moments that made my job interesting. Landing a helicopter on the lawn of Windsor Castle for a fairy tale visit with Queen Elizabeth and the royal family. The highlight of our visit was when the Queen and I went horseback riding together, while Nancy and Prince Philip took a horse-drawn carriage. I must admit, the Queen is quite a skilled rider. We will always remember our visit to Windsor Castle for the warmth and hospitality of the Queen and Prince Philip. They could not have been more gracious." Ronald Reagan served as the American leader from 1981 to 1989 and met with the British Queen several times during his tenure. They shared many common interests, including horseback riding. The mutual affection between the monarch and Reagan was evident. It is said that out of his entire European tour in 1982, which also included an audience with the Pope in G7 and NATO meetings, Reagan considered the horseback ride with the Queen at Windsor Castle as the main event. The president even managed to persuade Elizabeth II to approach a group of journalists and photographers for a brief chat, something she was known to do very rarely. The stay of Reagan in the United Kingdom in 1982 involved a state banquet and an address to both houses of Parliament. However, newly released Foreign Office documents show that President Reagan highlighted one event as the most important element of his entire presidential tour of Europe. The ride with the Queen through Windsor Great Park, cites the Mirror from royal historian Robert Hardman. To thank the Queen, the president invited her to Los Angeles, knowing that she had long wanted to visit. In 1983, Elizabeth II and Prince Philip traveled to the Reagan's ranch in Santa Barbara. The former press secretary of Her Majesty later recounted that the Queen found the trip delightful and terribly exhilarating. President George W. Bush first met Queen Elizabeth during a lunch at Buckingham Palace as part of his 6-day European tour in 2001. In 2003, President George W. Bush visited the United Kingdom on an official state visit. The former President of the United States described meeting the Queen with his wife Laura Bush as an honor. He characterized Elizabeth II as a woman of great intelligence, charm, and wit. Staying at Buckingham Palace and having tea with Her Majesty and her corgis is one of our fondest memories of the presidency. Queen Elizabeth skillfully guided England through difficult moments, thanks to her confidence in her people and her vision of a bright future. George Bush recalled in his memories of the shared tea with Her Majesty and the royal corgis. According to Reuters, before beginning the meal, Bush and Elizabeth II exchanged toasts, celebrating the enduring Anglo-American friendship, with Bush emphasizing that under the Queen the friendship between the two countries deepened and the alliance grew even stronger. At the British ambassador's residence in Washington, the Queen held a reciprocal reception, a state dinner for the U.S. President, his wife, and members of the American government. The Queen visited America again in 1991, when she was the guest of honor at a state dinner. On that occasion, someone at the White House misjudged the height of the podium where Her Majesty was to deliver a speech. This incident was dubbed Podiumgate, as only the Queen's purple hat was visible instead of her face. Interestingly, during his first visit to the United Kingdom in 1997, Bill Clinton, the 42nd President of the United States, and his wife Hillary declined an invitation for tea with Queen Elizabeth II. This is mentioned in previously classified documents. The purpose of the former American leader's visit to London was a meeting with the British Prime Minister, Tony Blair. The meeting between the Queen and the Clintons could have taken place between the U.S. President's joint press conference with the British Prime Minister and the official dinner. The Clintons justified their refusal by expressing a desire to be tourists and try Indian food. According to an archival briefing note from Downing Street, they nevertheless expressed gratitude to the Queen for her invitation. Instead of tea, Bill and Hillary chose shopping, even though the British Foreign Office also offered Clinton a jam session playing the saxophone with Blair, who played the guitar. A dinner featuring Indian cuisine was replaced with a visit to the French restaurant Le Pont de la Tour near Tower Bridge. As a result, a press conference with Clinton and Blair took place, followed by a dinner with them and their spouses. Between these events, Clinton spent his time in London. Queen Elizabeth II and President Bill Clinton first met in 1994 at the 50th anniversary celebration of the D-Day landings in Normandy in the city of Portsmouth in southern England. President Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton were invited to spend the night on the royal yacht Britannia. The royal couple visited the Clintons several times during his presidency due to Bill Clinton's involvement in the Northern Ireland peace process. President Clinton said, "She is a very smart woman who knows a lot about the world. I think she is a very impressive person. I like her a lot." They met again when Clinton, First Lady Hillary, and their daughter Chelsea visited Buckingham Palace during a 5-day European tour in December 2000. The Queen went on an official state visit to America in 2007. George W. Bush hosted a dinner in her honor, which was the only white-tie event during his generally informal presidency. As is well known, the Queen strictly adheres to her schedule and values every minute of her time. It is no surprise that even a visit from a former American president could not alter her plans. Former British Chancellor of the Exchequer George Osborne once shared that Her Majesty asked him at a state banquet to politely usher out then-President Barack Obama, as it was late and the monarch needed to retire for the night. Osborne made this statement during a conversation with former MP and Old Pauline Club Minister Lord Ed Vize. President Barack Obama joined the Queen for a banquet in May 2011 in London. Notably, he was the only president besides George W. Bush to receive a full state reception. "I was at the banquet, the state banquet of the United Kingdom for the arrival of Barack Obama. The Queen approached me and said, 'You will tell the President that it is late and I want to go to bed,'" explained Osborne. He noted that at the time, Barack Obama was having a great time, but apparently his enjoyment needed to be curtailed. "I looked at Barack Obama, who was having a wonderful time drinking vodka martinis with his companions, and thought, 'Oh my, I will be the one who has to go and send him home,'" Osborne recounted, both flustered and amused. The issue was with the Queen's strict schedule, which she would not break even for meetings with high-ranking world politicians. However, Barack Obama seemed not to hold any resentment towards Her Majesty, as behind closed doors, both the monarch and Prince Philip were excellent hosts. Then former President Barack Obama arrived in London on a state visit and, of course, attended the formal banquet at Buckingham Palace. During the celebratory dinner, he toasted the Queen and the special relationship between the United Kingdom and the United States. Obama offered warm words about the monarch immediately after the orchestra played the national anthem. That year was significant for the friendship between the two nations, as Obama appreciated the solidarity the United Kingdom had demonstrated over the years, including after London supported the country following the attacks on September 11, 2001. Barack Obama also visited the United Kingdom in 2016, and in 2013 at the G8 summit, the president jokingly called the British Chancellor George Osborne Jeffrey. Obama later apologized for the awkward nickname, as it was reminiscent of his favorite R&B performer, Jeffrey Osborne. The Queen especially bonded with the president's beloved wife, Michelle. During their second visit to the United Kingdom, the couple presented Elizabeth II with a heartfelt gift, which surely touched her heart. It was a special photo album capturing memories of the Queen's father's last visit to America. In that moment, she couldn't hold back her tears and later admitted, she would be especially pleased to meet with them again. Subsequently, President Barack Obama broke several etiquette rules when meeting the British Queen outside of London. The president was the first to shake hands with Elizabeth II, thereby breaking several protocols associated with the presence of royalty. According to etiquette, even a representative of a superpower does not have the right to shake hands with a reigning monarch. By heraldic status, any monarch stands above the president of any country. Even if Elizabeth II had been a private individual, a man should not shake a lady's hand during a private visit, and Obama's trip to the Windsor estate was officially a private visit. He also violated the rule of guest greeting and the propriety guidelines regarding interactions between the older and younger. The Queen was older than Obama, and it was the elder who should have initiated the handshake. A similar incident occurred in 2009. Michelle Obama, in a rather unconventional manner, patted the Queen on the shoulder during a reception, shocking the world. Adherence to protocol would say it was completely forbidden, but Michelle demonstrated that the Queen was quite relaxed about the lapse. "One of my main goals over 8 years was never to become a meme," joked Obama. "I had all these protocols buzzing in my head, and I thought, don't trip on the stairs and don't touch anyone, whatever you do. And so the Queen said, just come in and sit wherever you want." The incident happened at the end of a reception that took place in a relaxed atmosphere. The Queen and Michelle Obama came close, discussing their height differences. In a gesture of affection, the Queen put her arm around the wife of the American president. Michelle Obama responded in kind, saying upon farewell that she enjoyed the meeting. According to long-standing British tradition and protocol, touching the Queen is strictly forbidden. The Queen, however, can touch any of her subjects, for which she wears gloves. Former Australian Prime Minister Paul Keating was once nicknamed the Lizard of Oz by the press for a similar faux pas. Still, the Queen showed no displeasure and continued to joke and smile. Elizabeth II and the Duke of Edinburgh hosted a reception for the leaders of the G20, whose meeting began in London. Barack Obama gifted the Queen an iPod and a rare book by American composer Richard Rodgers, signed by the musician. In return, the royal couple presented the American guests with their own portrait. In the summer of 2018, Donald Trump deemed it necessary to make an official visit to London. Special attention was focused on the meeting between Trump and Prince Harry. The two had personal grievances. In 2016, Prince Harry's wife, American actress Meghan Markle, stated that if Trump became president of the United States, she would leave the country, possibly moving to Canada. The future Duchess of Sussex harshly criticized the American leader, calling him a misogynist. Trump decided not to hold back and, before his visit to the United Kingdom, responded to journalists' questions about Meghan's past statements by saying she was nasty. Prince Harry could not forgive Trump for such words about his wife, so he kept his distance from the American president. During the tour of Buckingham Palace, he briefly accompanied Trump's daughter Ivanka. He did not appear at the state banquet at all, nor did Meghan Markle attend the reception. At the table, President Trump sat next to Elizabeth II. It appeared that Trump managed to entertain Elizabeth II, as the Queen smiled and laughed throughout the evening. In addition to tea, the politician attended a ceremony involving the Queen's Guard. Prior to the joint inspection of the troops, musicians of the Coldstream Guards, an elite unit of the Royal Guard, and soldiers of the Honor Guard, marched approximately 20 kilometers through the streets of London. The Queen, as usual, arrived first, wearing a classic cornflower blue coat and a matching hat. After a brief wait for the presidential couple, Her Majesty greeted Trump, who shook her hand correctly, though no bows were forthcoming from the Americans that Friday. Almost immediately, Trump and Elizabeth proceeded to the troop inspection. When the ceremony concluded, the Queen escorted Donald and Melania to Windsor Castle for a private tea without journalists' cameras. This time, everything went smoothly. According to another rule, the monarch must enter a room first, with guests simply following. Joe Biden became the 5th U.S. president to be received at Windsor Castle. This meeting marked the first time the British monarch met with a foreign leader since the start of the pandemic. Contrary to reports from many global media outlets claiming it was Biden's first encounter with the Queen, the current U.S. president had already met the British monarch in person. In 1982, then-Senator Biden was part of a parliamentary delegation that Her Majesty received in the United Kingdom. During his sole visit to Elizabeth II, the U.S. president made two notable missteps. The first mistake Biden made was wearing sunglasses. He kept them on almost the entire time he was outdoors. According to protocol, dark glasses should not be worn in the presence of the monarch unless there are medical reasons. It should be noted that Joe Biden is not the only one to have violated this rule. 3 years ago, Anna Wintour, the editor-in-chief of American Vogue, made the same faux pas. Known for her signature sunglasses, she did not remove them even in the presence of the British monarch during London Fashion Week. Biden's second, more significant misstep was his post-visit interview. After tea and a private conversation with the Queen, Biden told the press that Elizabeth II wanted to know more about the presidents of Russia and China. "We had a long talk. She wanted to know what the two leaders I am about to meet are like, Mr. Putin and Mr. Xi Jinping," Biden told journalists. Such revelations are a serious breach of protocol, which advises against disclosing the contents of private conversations with the British monarch. Usually, the Queen responded to such lapses with indifference, not showing any sign that the interlocutor was behaving inappropriately. When you've been on the throne for nearly 70 years and spent most of your life meeting foreign dignitaries, it's easier not to worry about such trivialities, suggests royal correspondent Brianna Morton from the publication Gossip Cop. Over her 69-year reign, the British Queen met with every U.S. president except one, Lyndon Johnson. There have been many speculations about why Queen Elizabeth II never met President Lyndon Johnson during his time in office. Archivists from the Presidential Library told the BBC, President Johnson and Queen Elizabeth corresponded from March 1964 to July 1967. Nothing serious, congratulations on births, birthday wishes, and condolences on the death of Winston Churchill. Queen Elizabeth never sent an invitation to President Johnson to visit the United Kingdom, and President Johnson never sent an invitation to the Queen to visit the United States. However, the White House Historical Association provided a plausible explanation for why the Queen was unable to meet President Johnson. She was pregnant. Archivists added, Queen Elizabeth II never met President Lyndon Johnson during his presidency and was unable to attend John F. Kennedy's funeral because she was pregnant with Prince Edward. Another member of the royal family is known to have met Lyndon B. Johnson in Washington, leading to an interesting story. While the Queen never met President Lyndon B. Johnson, her younger sister, Princess Margaret, made time for a meeting. During her eventful tour of the United States in 1965, the Earl and Countess of Snowdon visited several cities across the country, concluding their journey with a formal dinner at the White House. It was here that the royal couple, along with President and First Lady Johnson, enjoyed a state dinner, followed by a rather lively celebration. While the series The Crown presents viewers with a boisterous scene, reports from the time described the meeting as a small but remarkably lively dance after dinner. Both the president and the princess delivered polite speeches about the special relationship between the U.S. and the UK, with Margaret even wishing the presidential couple a happy wedding anniversary. As noted by a New York Times journalist at the time, there was laughter and mingling. Margaret smoked a cigarette with a long holder, and everyone looked completely at ease. Thus, Joe Biden became the last American president to meet Queen Elizabeth. It is known that Prince Harry managed to form a friendship with Mrs. Biden and actively supported their family. For example, Prince Harry and Joe Biden watched a wheelchair rugby match together, where the U.S. faced Denmark in 2016. On October 18th, Joe Biden bid farewell to Elizabeth II at Westminster Palace in London. Accompanied by his wife Jill and the U.S. ambassador to the UK, Jane Hartley, the head of the White House attended the public farewell ceremony for Elizabeth II. Following this, Biden and the First Lady left a message in the condolence book at Lancaster House, a property owned by the UK Foreign Office. "She reminds me of my mother," Joe Biden said candidly about Queen Elizabeth.